Hello, everyone. My name is Chris Hume. Welcome to the Lancaster Patriot Podcast, brought to you by futureofchristendom.org. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I have a story to share with you. This is an all-American story, as American as apple pie and baseball. It's the story of a farm stand and a zoning officer in a conflict. So this story was covered by Lancaster Farming, Dave Lefevre. Thanks, Dave, for writing this article, published October 15th, 2024. And the title is Popular Lancaster County Farm Stand Appeals Township Crackdown. All right, so they must be doing something really bad here. We got the township going after this farm stand. Here's a picture of the farm stand, Smucker's Farm Market, LLC. Got some pumpkins out there. Looks like he's selling some plums and pears and even eggs and garlic. Seems to be a good service to his neighbor. You know, it's just lowly old me here. I'm not a legislator. I'm not a government official. So I really can't tell if this is a good thing. You know, if we take Stephen Wolfe's book, The Case for Christian Nationalism, he says that the civil authorities, the civil government, those when you get in those office, once you get elected to civil power, quote unquote, you get this special wisdom. You know more, you can learn more, and you can tell better than people like you and me whether or not what Smuckers is doing here is for the common good. I do want to share a quote on that. Stephen Wolfe says this: "But many or perhaps most laws evade a simple evaluation, mainly because civil authorities are typically in a better position than private persons to make judgments about what serves the common good." So I would think, you know, just me here, sitting here looking at this farm stand, I would think that this is a good thing, right? That selling pumpkins, selling watermelons, I'm not a big fan of cantaloupes, but I get it. To each his own. You want to sell cantaloupes, you want to buy cantaloupes, I think that's a good thing, okay? And I think Smuckers should be free to do it. However, there's a problem here. Because of the system that we have embraced, which is contra biblical law, which is contra anti-legislative theonomy, we've embraced a system wherein the government says, well, maybe it's a good idea to sell watermelons and cantaloupes and pumpkins, but you have to do it our way or else we're going to crack down on you. So let's go through this story, and I want to make a few comments along the way. So if you haven't read the story, I'll try to read most of it here. Lancaster, PA. A community east of Lancaster is rallying around a farm market facing pressure from the township to reduce its size. Okay, so we have the first hint of the problem with Mr. Smucker's farm market. Not that he's selling poisoned food, not that he's cheating his customers, not that he's telling them one thing and then giving them a different product. Our first clue at his error is that his farm stand is too big. Let's carry on. Farmer and produce retailer Jesse Smucker was notified by an East Lampeter Township zoning officer in June that his Smucker's farm market was in violation of a township ordinance that limits the sales area to 500 square feet. Okay, so this zoning officer, he's just doing his job right now. As we go through this, I want you to think about how many layers of bureaucracy have we instituted because we've embraced an unbiblical vision of civil government. If we had a biblical form of civil government, I submit to you, we would not have zoning officers. So there's our first problem. We're 2 paragraphs in, and we have zoning officers, and we have a township ordinance that limits the sales area of a man's business. 2 things that we would not have if we had biblical law. 2 things that we would have and do have in a statist, natural law legislative system. This is another example of the practical outworkings of natural law legislation. As I've said before, my goal on this podcast, one of my main goals, is to bring these philosophical theories to the practical world, to the practical realm, to apply them, okay? Because this stuff is happening all around us. These sort of American stories of zoning officers meddling in the affairs of their neighbor who has done no wrong, are a dime a dozen. Why? Because we have the system that Stephen Wolfe and others argue for. We have the system wherein man creates laws to regulate his neighbor, all in the name of the common good. So let's go on here. Most of the produce and flowers sold at the stand are grown by Smucker on his 50-acre farm that adjoins the market. He is the 4th generation on the farm since his family acquired it in 1958. Now, I don't think the story covers his farm, but I mean, we have to ask, should Smucker have a 50-acre farm? I mean, does that conduce to the common good? You know, maybe we should put a limit on that as well. Maybe we should tell him that your farm is too big, right? That's not for the common good. It's going to cause too many smells. We could have a shopping market. We could have a shopping plaza center in there. We could have a road that goes through there. The state can come along and say, eminent domain for the common good. You're not allowed to have your 50-acre farm. Not unheard of in a natural law legislative system, but contrary to biblical law. Let's move on with the story here. The market on Rockvale Road lies just south of a commercial district of the township along Route 30 that includes numerous restaurants and stores, as well as the Dutch Wonderland Amusement Park and the American Music Theater. Smucker appealed the enforcement, and on October 10th, more than 100 people filled the township meeting room for a hearing on the matter before the Township Zoning Hearing Board. All right, now we got to introduce this zoning officer. So the story continues. Zoning officer David Sinopoli said he observed the Smucker's outdoor display area growing year by year after the township approved the current 500 square foot market building in early 2020. Okay, again, pause there for a moment. How many layers of statism, bureaucracy, and man-made law do we have now? We have Smucker here. We learned that he had to get approval in order to serve his neighbor. So it's not simply that the civil government says, well, we are going to issue some rules and then you have to follow them. Well, actually, you have to even get our approval before you can even have a building to serve your neighbor and even be in a position to follow our rules. And then if you don't stick to them strictly, we're going to pay someone. I'm assuming this zoning officer is paid. We're going to pay someone with taxpayer money, by the way, forced taxation. We're going to pay this guy to regulate you and to make sure that you do follow our rules. So just understand how much money already has been wasted on this before anything even happened. How much time and money, time is money, right? How much production has been wasted because of people sitting around in a township building paid for with the forced taxation, stolen money. Zoning officers, I'm assuming they're paid to do this full time to see if any of their neighbors are breaking the law, breaking the regulation. I mean, when you add this up, this is millions and millions and billions of dollars across this nation that is put into something that is supposed to be for the common good, okay? None of this is biblical. You will not find in the Bible a system where a civil government pays someone to meddle in your affairs. I mean, that is unjust. It is not authorized in Scripture. Now, you may have examples of tyranny in Scripture. We certainly do, but we don't have an authorization in the Bible for this sort of thing. And we understand this in our personal lives. The proverb that talks about he who takes a passing dog by the ear is like one who meddles in a quarrel that is not his own. Paul instructed Christians to seek to live quietly, to live peaceably, to mind their own affairs, to mind their own business, right? To leave other people alone and be left alone in this sense. Doesn't mean we don't confront sin, doesn't mean we don't encourage others, but we are not a people who meddle in other people's affairs. And that is not authorized in my private life, and it's not authorized for the civil government. The only reason this sort of thing has become as American as baseball and apple pie is because we have embraced the very thing that Stephen Wolfe argues for in his book, The Case for Christian Nationalism, and that is this idea of the state as an ordering, regulating entity that has been instituted by God to preemptively go in there, basically be a central planner. Right? Now, he might reject that phrase, but it's hard for me to see it as anything else. The state is the conception of the state. It's a Lockean conception. It's a man-made conception that civil government exists to regulate our lives and to preemptively punish people and make sure, I got to get out there. We got to measure things. We got to make sure everything's going to work out, because if we don't handle this preemptively, everything will fall apart. Biblically, the role of the magistrate is to establish justice, to carry out God's wrath on the wrongdoer. So, is Mr. David Sinopoli fulfilling the function of a biblical magistrate? Is he executing God's wrath on the wrongdoer? I want you to keep that in mind as we go. This is, again, a very practical application of these things that we're talking about. What does it mean to follow the Bible in the civil sphere? If we are Christians, our desire is to apply the Bible to all of life. Now, we don't have in Scripture an instruction manual for everything. We don't have an instruction on how to give someone a haircut, how to make pumpkin pie, right? How to train your dog, okay? But we do have everything that pertains to life and godliness, and we do have clear commands in Scripture not to add to his law, not to take away. We have clear commands on what the role of a father is, of a pastor, of a magistrate. And so we are not authorized to go beyond what Scripture has given us when it comes to these roles. And the role of the magistrate is to execute God's wrath on the wrongdoer. David Sinopoli is acting in an unauthorized manner, and he has the backing of the American system, and he has the backing of Stephen Wolf's philosophy to support him. He has that behind him. I'm doing something for the common good here, guys. My job is to make sure that no one goes over this 500 square foot ordinance, because it's for the common good. You wouldn't want to live across the street from a 501 square foot farm market, would you? I mean, that's obvious, isn't it? I mean, natural law teaches us that living across the street from a large commercial area is not for the human good. And so 501 square feet is a bridge too far. Sinopoli said he used mapping technology to estimate the total size of the sales and display area to be about 15,000 square feet. I mean, it would be one thing if he were actually Smucker's neighbor and he went over to Smucker and said, can we work something out here? Your farm stand is getting too big. It's causing a lot of problems. Personally, I don't like it. Maybe can we come to an agreement? I mean, that would be a good thing, right? Now, I don't think Smucker would have any obligation in terms of justice to be like, well, yeah, okay, I'm not going to make my farm stand any more than 500 square feet. But that's not what happened. That's not what's happening here. This is zoning officer Sinopoli sitting in his desk, office, or at home, whatever, sitting in front of a computer. This is your taxpayer money at work, and looking at some map technology. I mean, I have it here on Google Maps, and I'm looking. Here is Smucker's farm market, and just think about what this guy is doing. Think about what your taxpayer money is going to, whatever township, county you live in. And there are hundreds and thousands of people like this, zoning officers, regulatory enforcers, regulatory agents. This is the system that we have because we've embraced natural law legislation. Now, the legislators don't call it that, but that's what it is. They sit around and they agree with. I have a hard time. When I read Stephen Wolf's book, it's hard for me to think how your run-of-the-mill GOP statist legislator, someone like Dave Zimmerman, who claims to be all about liberty, but will not stand for freedom, will not support Amos Miller when he is punished and prosecuted for serving his neighbor. It's hard for me to understand what they would disagree with in this book. Now, they might say, well, yeah, okay, I don't necessarily agree with that application. Maybe we shouldn't get involved in regulating the church over here. But fundamentally, I think they'd give a hearty amen to Stephen Wolf's premise. They're the legislators, and Stephen Wolf says, you guys have the wisdom that us peons here don't. You guys know what's best for us, so please make laws for the common good. And I mean, what legislator, Republican, Democrat, Independent, in our current system would not love that? That's what they do. That's why they exist, is to order our lives, and they think they know better than we do. So here's the zoning officer sitting in his office, sitting in his chair, paid for by taxpayer money, looking on his computer and saying, okay, I've been watching. I mean, he probably has a list of all the farm stands and businesses that have been approved, and he just monitors them. He just watches that. Understand how much production is wasted by this guy. This is also what is lost in this whole discussion. When you add this system of man-made law and man-made regulation, so much production is wasted. Even the issue of taxation, right? Which I'm assuming, my understanding is Stephen Wolf would agree with forced taxation. If I'm wrong, correct me. But my understanding is he would say, since paying your taxes is a good thing, which I agree, biblically, I am required to pay my taxes to the civil government if they're doing their duty, but it's a voluntary taxation, just like the tithe. It's a good thing. So what Stephen Wolf will say, well, since it's a good thing for citizens or people to pay their taxes, therefore the civil government can force you to do it because their job is to promote good. And so, and whatever conduces to the common good, human good, is something that they can use their civil power for. So therefore they can force you to pay your taxes. You understand how that logic can use to justify any quote unquote good thing. But the issue with taxation, I lost my train of thought there. What was I going to say about forced taxation? the zoning officer sitting there, the amount of productivity that is wasted via forced taxation. I was listening to a Supreme Court case recently. If you like that sort of thing, it's kind of interesting. It's very painful at times. You can find these podcasts where they just play the oral arguments from all the Supreme Court cases as they're coming through. And this one was on sales tax, and it was particularly relevant to me in my job because we're dealing with some of this. There's products that are sold out of state, and there's all these regulations on making sure that the government gets their money in that state. Okay, if you sell a product to someone in Ohio or Wisconsin or Michigan or Florida, those states need their sales tax, or else they won't be able to function. And the Supreme Court case was, I forget the details, but the ignorance and the hubris of these Supreme Court justices sitting there saying, well, I mean, it's not that much of an inconvenience, is it, to make these businesses get the software and track all their orders and make sure that, every state gets every single penny that they need from their sales in that state. They have no idea. They have no idea how many hours business owners spend, how much money they spend on tax software, and how many hours they spend dealing with, oftentimes, problems with the software. How much production is wasted because of the system. It's hard for us to understand because we are so, we're surrounded by this system that we think it's normal and just to have zoning officers sitting in front of a computer looking at Google Maps. Stephen Wolfe, I don't know whether or not I assume he's thought through these things, but the amount of productivity, the amount of dominion taking that is lost because of this very system that he promotes, it's staggering. It blows the mind. And when you listen to these Supreme Court, this is why when Wolfe makes claims like, well, once you get into this office, you know better than regular people about what is good. And when I listen to these Supreme Court justices, the height of our system of jurisprudence, right? They have no clue about business. They have no clue about ordinary Americans' lives. They have no idea. It's all pie in the sky, quote unquote, constitutional philosophizing that has nothing to do with justice and has nothing to do with real life. Well, it's not that hard to make sure you pay all your taxes to every state. They've never ran a business. I'm not a business owner, but I understand how difficult it can be when you're trying to make a product, provide a service, manage employees, deal with competition, which is a good thing. And then on top of that, you have to make sure that you're meeting all these regulations and paying thousands and thousands of dollars so that you are up to the latest tax law. It's insanity. It's destructive to what God has called man to do, and that is take dominion, love God, and serve neighbor. Okay, so let's go back to our story here. It's 15,000 square feet. Way out of line, Smucker. Way out of line. 15,000. And I don't know what's going on with Sinopoli here. He says, year by year it's growing. I'm assuming that Smucker didn't go from 500 to 15,000 in like one day. So this Sinopoli guy, this is what these people do. I mean, I don't know what he did. Maybe he missed it. Maybe he was looking at other places on Google Maps and he missed it. But I mean, he says he's been observing it growing year by year. So at what point does Sinopoli go over to Mr. Smucker and say, hey, I just noticed, you're at 600 square feet, you're at 700 square feet, you're at 800 square feet. I mean, did he do that? It doesn't seem like it. It's like he waits. And this is the same thing that happened with Amos Miller. Just waiting. States waiting, observing, building a case. We're going to use the taxpayer money of Americans to sit here and build a case against Amos Miller, not because he committed a wrong, but because he didn't follow regulations. So here you got Sinopoli there, sitting in his chair year after year, just waiting for the opportunity, man. He's just waiting. 15,000 square feet, that does it. That's the straw that broke the camel's back, okay? It's about 15,000 square feet, and we're coming after you. Smucker's attorney Okay, now, here, hang on a sec. I gotta take a drink. This is my ARC mug. If you haven't been to the ARC Encounter in Kentucky, check it out. Fascinating. Imagine how much better it would be if they didn't have to spend their time on forced taxation, regulations, and ordinances. Be that as it may, it's a great attraction. Go to the ARC Encounter, check it out. Okay, so now you have Smucker. I don't know if Susan Bucknam is doing this pro bono. I doubt it. Maybe she is, but most of the time, these attorneys are not. And so now you have Smucker who has to pay a lawyer. Why? How much money has been wasted? How much time? How much of the American taxpayers' money? How much of Smucker's money? How much of Smucker's time has been wasted in this already? Okay? All because man-made law, natural law legislation. Man is in control in the civil government of what you do with your farm stand. Smucker's attorney, Susan Bucknam of the Harrisburg-based agricultural law firm Bucknam Law, questioned Sinopoli on the validity of the enforcement attempt. All right, so get ready, Sinopoli. Bucknam's coming after you. She cited several... Okay, here we go. Now you're going to see. It gets really rich now. She cited... Guess what Bucknam's going to bring against Sinopoli? Okay? Well, what can she bring against Sinopoli in our man-made system? You know, she can't go to the Bible, right? Because the Bible's been rejected in our Lockean natural law enlightenment system. The Bible's not the standard of justice. So what can she go to? Well, she's going to go to Pennsylvania state law. She's going to use man-made law against man-made law. So what she cited several Pennsylvania state laws that protect agriculture from overly restrictive municipal ordinances. Isn't that this is another clear example? I mean, and Luke has spoken about this often. So has Joel. The civil government. Here's an example of the civil government. You have the people in Harrisburg now, the legislators in Harrisburg. They get together and they say, okay, we have our juniors there in the townships and the counties. They're doing their thing, making laws. They're doing their thing, conducing to the common good. Okay, they're doing the best they can. But we here in Harrisburg, we are a little higher up and we have a little better knowledge than they do. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to make some more laws, and we're going to make more laws to kind of counteract a little bit the laws those guys make, because they're trying to do the best they can, but they don't really understand what conduces to the common good, and we do, because we're legislators and we read Stephen Wolf's book, and we agree that we're better equipped than the peasants like Smucker, that guy that grows tomatoes or pumpkins and cantaloupes. I mean, that guy he has no idea what conduces to the common good, and he shouldn't really try to figure it out, right? I mean, if Smucker were to read Stephen Wolf's book, he'd have to say, well, man, this is probably one of those cases where I'm just not equipped. I mean, what am I? I'm just a dumb old farmer. I can't tell what's for the human good. Please, township, tell me. And then if the state tells you something otherwise, listen to the state. And so those guys and those legislators in Harrisburg, they read Stephen Wolf's book. They're like, yep, we're going to solve this problem, because one layer of bureaucracy is not enough. All right, this is America. One layer of bureaucracy is not enough. We're going to add another. All right, so we're gonna solve this problem. Time out. Pause. Once again, how many millions of dollars now have been spent in this process? Millions and millions of dollars to make laws, ordinances, whatever. All that matters is, are you going to be punished if you don't follow it? So whether you call it an ordinance, a regulation, a law, in the man-made system, what matters is, will I be punished if I don't follow this? So now we have millions and millions and millions of dollars spent on this whole apparatus, and the state comes in and says, well, we're going to spend more money and we're going to use our taxpayer-funded facilities and time to make more laws. Okay, so, well, Bucknam here, I mean, I get it. It's maddening, but she's going to be like, well, okay, I'm going to use the man-made law against man-made law, and something you can't do biblically, right? God is not opposed to himself. You're not going to have one law over here opposed to another law over here. So let's see. She cited several Pennsylvania state laws to protect agriculture from overly restrictive municipal ordinances. There you have it again. Sort of like Dave Zimmerman saying, well, I I'm opposed to, over-regulation. I'm opposed to government overreach. But that's not what happened here in the Amos Miller case, right? It's a useless term. So the state law is like, it's presented in this. I mean, I know Lancaster farming is it's at least connected to LNP, which is completely liberal, off the wall statists. But I love how they say overly restrictive, right? Like the state legislators, they're the benevolent ones coming in and saying, we know nothing of restrictive laws. Everything we do is to, help you, and we're gonna come in here and protect you. We're gonna protect you, protect agriculture from overly restrictive municipal ordinances. I don't think we grasp the depth of statism and anti-biblical thought that we have here after how many 7 paragraphs in this story. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And it's unbelievable that this sort of thing is the fruit of natural law legislation. And we have Christians out there arguing that we need this, that if we don't have this, our society will crumble apart. And we'll have, strip malls across the street from a farm stand. It'll be disaster. Okay. And, okay, here we go. Smucker's farm enrolled in an agricultural security area in the township. Under state law, all right, this gets really good. Just listen to us and then wait for what the zoning officer says. Under state law, an ASA, or Agricultural Security Area, recognizes retail marketing as part of agricultural production and requires that municipal ordinances cannot. And here's another great piece of advice or great piece of legislation from Harrisburg. Quote, municipal ordinances cannot unreasonably restrict farm practices or structures, end quote, Bucknam said. All right, here's the state law coming in to save the day. Hey, townships, don't unreasonably restrict farm practices. Well, obviously, these township guys, they're going to say, well, obviously, we're not being unreasonable here. Everything we do is reasonable. We are government officials. We've been elected by the people. We're in a position, per Stephen Wolfe, we have better knowledge, better insight than all the peons out there, all the hoi polloi. We know what's best. Everything we do is reasonable. So, but the state law is useless. The article continues. Other state laws that protect agriculture from local. It's just hilarious how it's written. The state laws protect agriculture from local ordinances. So we have state laws that protect people from we have man-made laws that protect you from man-made laws. And then we're going to need more man-made laws to protect the township from the state laws. And then we're going to have a federal law to protect the state from the township exercising their sovereignty against the state. Do you see the insanity of this? This is the American system. It's not biblical. Other state laws that protect agriculture from local ordinances include the Right to Farm Act, the Agricultural Communities and Rural Environment Act, and the Municipalities Planning Code. There is so much of this stuff, and so much of my money and your money has been poured into this. So much production has been wasted on these acts, right? On these laws. These legislators, I wish they were just useless. I remember when the Republicans, it was a couple years ago, it happens fairly often, right? But there isn't an agreement made. It was with the whole Speaker of the House, and the Democrats were preventing the Republicans from getting back to Harrisburg, and the Republicans are out there making their appeal. Let us go back to work for you. Let us get back. Are you insane? Do you want more laws? This is what you get. I wish and I pray it's bad enough that they take our money, that they force us to pay for their job as meddlers and statist regulators. I wish that they didn't do anything. I wish that they just took the money and went out and partied, and I wish they did that, and they never went and made another law. I would take that. I would take that sacrifice of that waste of money, because at least then people like Smucker would be free to serve his neighbor. Of course, the whole thing should be abolished. Yeah, these laws, all these acts really helping. So, okay, now back to this zoning officer. Sinopoli said he was okay, this is so rich, right? Sinopoli said he was focused on upholding the township ordinance and was unaware of the state provisions. Okay, here's a zoning officer. A zoning officer. His job is to regulate people's lives, their businesses, the square footage of their business. That is his job. Okay? J-O-B, job. And listen to what he says. I'm not up on state law. I'm not up on state law, he said. Are you kidding me? I mean, and this guy can just say this. I mean, obviously, I'm just reading this. I don't know his tone, but it's just like, yeah, I didn't know. What's the big deal? I mean, my job here is to uphold the township ordinance. You can't expect me as a zoning officer who is paid by the people. You can't expect me to know state law. Are you kidding me? Do you expect me to actually read everything that comes out of Harrisburg? Do you expect me to care? Am I supposed to know what you guys what you do? I mean, I'm just a zoning officer. Like, I don't know what to say to that, because you and I are expected to know every single law that comes from Harrisburg. Obviously, it's impossible. We can't, or whatever your state capital is. But in our man-made system, ignorance of the law is not an excuse. What, you didn't know that you were supposed to register your vehicle? You didn't know that you have to go to the state and bow before them and register your children to homeschool? You didn't know? Tough. You didn't know that and I'll share another story. You didn't know that you needed all this permitting in order to serve your neighbor and have an Airbnb? Well, I'm shutting you down. And so Zainopoli here is like, well, I didn't know. I mean, I'm not up on state law. It's not like my job is to know the ordinances and the laws as it relates to businesses and square footage. It's not like that's my job is not to do that. My job is just to uphold the township ordinance. Pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. So this guy's like, sorry, man. I'm not up on the law. Oh my goodness. The Smucker farm has also been preserved by the Lancaster Farmland Trust and is enrolled in the Clean and Green program, which offers tax relief for keeping land and agricultural, woodland, or open space. Great. Yep. We're going to tax you and take your money, and then we'll throw you a bone every now. Aren't we so benevolent? We'll give you tax relief. We won't steal that much from you. Bucknam also questioned the language in the ordinance that reads, okay, now she's going to go question the local ordinance. The total display or sales area of the agricultural and or horticultural products sold at the farm stand, at the roadside stand, shall be limited to 500 square feet. The or in total display or sales area makes the ordinance unclear, she said. Okay, so she says, well, even your local ordinance there, I don't know, it's not very clear. It says that shall be limited, it says the total display or sales area shall be limited to 500 square. I mean, who cares? Smucker and his family grow a wide range of produce and flowers during the traditional growing season. They grow carrots, radishes, and greens in high tunnels over the winter. Smucker said the market's volume has grown about 25% each year since he started it on the current site in 2019 after moving from a location in West Lampeter Township. Limiting the market area to 500 square feet would severely curtail the amount of space he needs to display and sell goods grown on the farm, Smucker said. Listen to this. We'd have to cut down by 80%, he said. It would mean the business is not sustainable. Okay? Again, now, I don't fault Smucker. I mean, he's living in the statist system. I get it. And maybe when he got the approval, it was, hey, you can't go over 500. But I have no problem with what Smucker's doing. He's serving his neighbor. Right? What is he doing that's wrong? What evil has he committed? What evil has he committed? How is what he is doing not for the common good? Well, I'm sure I know an argument. I bet people, maybe Stephen Wolf can make an argument here. It's for the common good. He should have just been a good boy and not gone over 500 square feet. He should have, stopped serving his neighbor, right? Because it's more important to follow the township ordinances than it is to serve your neighbor food. Right? I mean, common good. So Smucker goes on, displaying a plentiful amount of produce is key to successful marketing, he said. If I put out 2 mums, I would sell probably 1 in a day, he said. If I put out 150, I would sell probably 50. All right, so he's saying, look, I'm just trying to serve my neighbor. And again, anyway, I'll continue. Just trying to serve my neighbor here, guys. Okay, the 2 hours allotted for the hearing fell far short of the time needed to hear witnesses' testimony or public comments. I mean, not that these people are going to care what people actually say, but in 2 hours, I'm sure this will go on. Hours that could have been spent in production, hours that could have been spent with his family, hours that could have been spent serving others, wasted in statist bureaucracy. Natural law legislation, baby. And it's not over yet. The hearing is set to continue on December 12th. So now you have Smucker, who's got to spend more time thinking about this, more time stressing out about what he's going to do with his business, more time paying his lawyer, this Bucknam there, more time away from productivity. This is destructive. This is evil. This is wicked, right? This is, what does it say in Proverbs? The fallow ground of the poor would yield much increase, but it is swept away by injustice. That's what this is. This is so maddening. And that most Christian pastors, I'll just speak to you for a moment, do not see this. And unfortunately, if they're reading, I mean, most of them would disagree with Stephen Wolfe where I would agree with Steve. That's the thing. The things that I agree with in Stephen Wolfe's book, and there's a lot, are the things that the statist pastors who support this sort of thing would disagree with both me and Wolfe on, that we need to have our Christianity applied in the public square, that we should not be, pacifist and retreatist. But the foundation of Wolfe's philosophical philosophy in terms of the role of the civil government, every one of those statist pastors would give a hearty amen and say, yeah, that's submit to the government. They're telling you you can't do this. Don't do it. Okay, so this hearing is going to continue December 12th. Now we go on. The township manager, Ralph Hutchison, confirmed on October 15th that Smucker is allowed. Okay, yeah, what a nice guy. What a nice township manager. Smucker, we're going to allow it. Smucker is allowed to keep operating the farm stand during the ongoing appeal process. Isn't that nice? What a benevolent overlord. Fine. You can continue to serve your neighbors food and decorations. We'll allow it. I mean, we could, Smucker. We could shut you. I just want you to know that we have the authority. This is civil power. All right. And if he was a Stephen Wolfe fan, this is civil power ordained of God. We have the authority to shut you down. Why? Because you didn't follow our ordinance that was for the common good. But we're not going to do it. Just keep that in mind, Smucker. We could do it. Tyrants. Absolute tyrants. In addition to appealing the ordinance, Smucker is applying for a variance that would allow him to build a 7,000 square foot combination farm market and retail greenhouse. Oh my, the horror of if Smucker were allowed to do that without asking the government, our nation would descend into tyranny, and not tyranny, it would descend into chaos and mayhem. If Smucker were allowed to build this building without the township's approval. That's why we need natural law legislation. I hope you see how incredibly dangerous it would be if Smucker could build a farm market and greenhouse without the township's approval. Obviously, I'm being facetious. This is just full statism. After the meeting, Smucker said he believes he's operating legally under state law and the township's crackdown attempt is misguided. I don't know, Smucker. He might be one of those Mennonite types who, unfortunately, have embraced the real But again, I mean, this is just so confusing because Stephen Wolfe will really critique the Anabaptist mentality, but yet these guys are the guys that are going to agree with Stephen Wolfe's view of the regulatory overlord state that can make new laws outside of Scripture for the common good. And so Smucker's going to say, well, I want to do whatever the government says, but I got the state law over here saying one thing and the ordinance law, and poor Smucker. I hope that I'll try to reach out to him. I'm going to give him a copy of Luke's book. Okay. So Smucker here is trying to find salvation in the man-made law for his business, at least. Okay. And then another quote from Smucker. It's really okay. And actually, yes. So this confirms that Bucknam is not doing this pro bono, which I don't blame her. She's got to work. It's really discouraging for us right now, he said, estimating a cost of $2,500 in attorney's fees just to prepare for and participate in the October 10th hearing. And here, you're going to have your smug politician, legislator. Well, SCOTUS, Supreme Court Justice. Well, that's not too much of an inconvenience, is it? Just a few $1,000s for your attorney. Despicable. We're spending money to stay in business, he said. There you go. I mean, there you have it. The statist system makes the people pay to stay in business to serve their neighbor. We don't understand how far we are from justice in this nation when it comes to things like this. It's unbelievable. Smucker and his wife Amanda have 5 children, ages 1 to 9. Let's see. We got a little bit more here. Ben King of Quarry View Building Group in Wrong said the township has problems such as drug dealing that officials should be focusing on instead of making life difficult for a farmer. It's government overreach, King said. Our local government is spending time on stuff it shouldn't be spending time on. All right, I'm not going to read all of these quotes. Let me see here. All right, now we do have a neighbor here who does have a complaint. So this neighbor, John Lewis, says he supports Smucker, but wants to see the sales area move back farther from the road to prevent noise, dirt, and safety concerns. With more than 400 new apartments slated for the nearby shops at Rockville, Lewis expects traffic at the market to get worse. Again, inconvenience, maybe, but not a matter of justice. Okay, not a matter of justice and not a function of the civil government to make the neighborhood look the way John Lewis wants it to look. I'm sorry, John. That's not the job of civil government. It's not to cater to our convenience. Smucker said he would consider moving the market area back from the road, but he wants it to still be visible as he believes that's the best advertising. Yeah, I mean, how about Smucker gets involved in what you do with your house? We'll negotiate with the neighbors, he said. You just don't want... Okay. No, we'll negotiate with the neighbors, he said. You don't want to just hide the market stand. Okay. He's saying, look, I'll work with my neighbors. I mean, but I need to display my business. Smucker said he's been working in farming since he started walking, and he got into the produce business at the age of 15. And we'll end there. So, okay, they're going to have another hearing in December. All right, well, this is an example of American quote-unquote justice, American government. I mean, this is a great experiment. This is people getting together, solving problems, right? Or is it? No, it's people getting together, causing problems, and then trying to get together to solve the problems they caused, and just more and more laws come. I mean, I'm sure now there's going to be some legislator, whether it's related to this or something else, who comes along and says, well, I got a new idea, I got a new law, and we're going to make this even better to prevent this from happening in the future. All right. Well, what else can we say to that? This is messed up. Okay, I do want to share a couple quotes from Stephen Wolfe here, just to show you that this is very consistent with his system. Page 270. Hang on a minute. Let me find the right page. 272 in his book. Stephen Wolfe here is talking about, man-made law. How do we know when it's unjust? He says that he has 4 points, but I'm just going to read the 4th one. He says, lastly, any law that does not conduce to the common good is unjust. For essential to any just law is the suitability to achieve the end of law. Okay. Any law that does not conduce to the common good is unjust. Hold that thought. I have another quote here, page 333, where he talks about tyrants. And tyrants, obviously, are going to make laws that do not conduce. Here's a quote. A tyrant is any civil ruler whose actions significantly undermine the conditions in which man achieves his true humanity, or as I've called it, the complete good. And then he goes on, all tyrants act for their private good, as many theorists have claimed. But we should bear in mind that the greatest tyrants may be those who think or give the appearance that they are here to help, whose smiling, smothering, mamish, and credentialed love infantilizes the people. A tyrant is not necessarily one with bad motivations or one who acts in bad faith, and the tyrant might even appear to be self-sacrificing or self-disregarding. How in the world, again, you cannot look at this situation with Smucker's farm stand and have any firm foundation to critique it from Stephen Wolfe's worldview. I would love to hear two people, I don't know if I'd want to listen to that, but two people who accept Stephen Wolfe's philosophy and yet disagree on the man-made law here, debate Did this conduce to the common good? The amount of time and money that is wasted on this form of government, it boggles the mind. Will there be issues in a theonomic system? Sure, there'll be some, and we've had theonomic systems. Go read your Bible, the book of Judges, and you say, oh, Judges, it was a disaster there. Luke makes this point over and over again. Read his book, The Sound Doctrine of Theocracy. The common refrain in the book of Judges is not everyone did what was right in his own eyes. It is the land had rest, the land had peace. So this is not something we've never had, but the further we get away from justice, the more tyranny and statism we do have. The amount of time and money and production that is wasted in order to achieve this thing it's almost like you never get justice from the system. It's promised. Well, yeah, if you allow man to make a bunch of laws and you create this system where we do this government together, you'll have justice. No, you won't. You'll have this. You'll have just constant bickering and constant confrontation between man-made law and man-made law. And how can you argue against the township zoning officer, the township board, or the state and say, well, which one of you is really conducing to the common good? And all this, it's like a philosophical experiment, and people's lives and businesses are pawns that are in the middle of it. And what if we get it wrong? Well, then we've ruined this man's business. It's so frustrating. I don't have time for this other story. This was a few years back, but there was a Twin Brook retreat in Lancaster County as well. Just briefly, Twin Brook retreat had to shut down and spend thousands and thousands of dollars because they weren't following some regulation or ordinance. There was no harm done, no neighbors bringing a charge, but it costs them tremendously. This is happening all over the place, and this is exactly what you get with natural law legislation. All right, well, that's it for today. I hope that Smucker is able to serve his neighbor. And I hope that David Sinopoli gets a real job. Look, we should not have these positions, but we need people to wake up and say, how can I do this thing and sin against God and my neighbor and meddle in your affairs because your farm stand has too much. This farm stand looks very small to me, but you know what? Whatever Smucker wants to do with his property, let him do it. Statist tyrants, people meddling in the affairs of others, and we expect blessing in our land. And most of the time, the Republicans are behind all this stuff. Behind it. Okay, for more information about the Lancaster Patriot, just go to futureofchristendom.org. There you'll find all these podcasts, Luke's podcast, Joel's podcast, Matt's podcast, content from the 2024 Future of Christendom Conference, working on getting another event set up for the spring, hopefully a debate on natural law versus theonomy. A lot more to come. If you want to support this show, thank you. And you can go to patreon.com/the Lancaster Patriot. It'll get you early access to these podcasts. It'll get you bonus content and hopefully more stuff as we go. All right, well, that's your American story for the day. Pray for justice, right? Pray for justice. Pray for your neighbors that they will be able to serve you and live quiet lives and without people meddling in their affairs and without them meddling in the affairs of others. All right, thanks for listening. Until next time, remember Christ, not township managers or zoning officers, is king. So long.